Okay, folks, we're going to dig into right into the chapters here. So the first, the one of the chapters here, I don't know where it's going to be positioned in the playlist yet. That's going to depend, but I'm kind of dealing with these chapters as they go, as because I need to look up the outline in the old archive disc. But this was the one I want to talk about because there's something today that came up. So I'm going to talk about transparency. This is the chapter on the transparency and authenticity of Americans. And this is a really tough one because so many other cultures are not transparent at all, and they don't understand it. They don't understand this. Tell it like it is. Okay, they don't understand it. Of what you say is what you think is what you do. What you say is what you think. Or what you say equals what you think equals what you do. This is very, 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 very. Do I need to set this high priority, kind of high things? This is very difficult for a lot of other cultures where this goes against their culture. It just goes against the way they've been taught for all the books they were trained as kids and things. Mike and and the transparency and authenticity. And I was just talking with a friends from China this afternoon, who I've known here for France for 10 years, and they just said, Jeff, you're so transparent in what you say and what you do that it puts it people can't figure it out because they think that what you're saying is actually opposite of what you're thinking behind the scenes, but what you say and what you do is actually what you think really. And they say it just is. And I said, guess what? Didn't Trump kind of do the same thing to everybody in the world for like 4 years from 2016 to 2020? He was actually up in the podium every day saying, I'm not saying I like Trump. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I like Trump, and I'm not saying I'm pro Trump at all. Okay, don't get that. I'm just saying that the same culture. Oops, shoot, got some kids in the background. I kind of hide the kids in the background here. I'm gonna do this so I don't want to have their faces in the video book here. So trying to hide the faces. Dang, they keep moving. So I'm in a restaurant, so I got to deal with this. Um, Lighting's better here. Lighting is better in the video, and the lighting in the background is actually cooler than at home. Okay, so that's the way it is. But Trump came into the scene in what surprised everyone in the entire world. Because that's what stopped me from writing the rest of this book for 5 years, because I decided I didn't have to say anything anymore. Because he's saying what we all grew up in America with. I'm all grew up. Okay, I'm making a generalization. Okay, there are exceptions to every rule. There are exceptions to every rule, but I'm just saying that Americans have actually grown up with this certain types of values, and transparency is part of it. And it's a historical thing. Okay, it came from the melting pot. It came from the Industrial Revolution kind of enhanced and accelerated this thing, but because of all these different cultures coming from all these different backgrounds, I'm gonna have another chapter here on the backgrounds of all the colonies, because I'm gonna reveal some other stuff. Gonna watch that chapter when I get to doing that one. I'm getting excited about doing this book. You can tell, okay? But I'm coming to start with the result here rather than talking about the actual history. I'm hinting towards the history because this is a book, right? Book, you got to tell references. You got to talk about references, right? So the reasons of the melting pot that started with the colonies and all these people from different colonies coming from different places in the world, different countries in Europe mainly, for different reasons, resulted in a certain kind of mentality that has and the mentalities that people had to be able to communicate with the Indians, which I'll get another chapter too about the Native American Indians, which I'm very ashamed of what has happened to them. I'm very ashamed. But I'm going to talk about that, okay? And American culture. Again, American culture is kind of I'm being very vague here. United States American culture. Because you got Canadian North American culture too. That would be a different book. Well, maybe a chapter or subchapter in this book to talk about that. Kind of other things. But the whole thing here of transparency is that Trump exhibited this. He showed this for 4 years, every single day on the first 7 days a week for 4 years. Okay, and I didn't, and actually, it's kind of that way, right? And he was reflecting all I ever wanted to say in this book, because I wanted to reveal who we are, and I didn't need to reveal because he was doing it. But it's actually made it I have to talk about, because people kept saying he doesn't. It's hard to understand him now. So that's what comes to understanding America as Americans, right? All right, here we're here. So the thing surprising with Trump, because this is a lot of this. I'm just going to use him as an example because it reflects all I live all the time in living in other cultures and working in other cultures. I have the same problem. Not that I'm, not that I am him, but just that the concept he grew up in. I'm very extrovert, and I'm the way he. I have the same cultural values of doing what I say and act upon is the same thing as what I think. This freaks people out who don't come from cultures that do it that way, right? So that's the truth here. That's the truth. This is part of the factor of why other people cultures have a difficulty understanding this, right? Because I'll give you a couple examples here. Um, the French, where I've lived for 32 years, I guess I can talk about that right now. I read an article about working in the French, so I kind of know that a little bit, right? I'm culturated here, but they have another way of thinking. They say certain things. They don't, and they're actually don't to actually say things differently and do things differently than what they really think. And this causes problems with other cultures come to work here, because they're actually attacking people behind the scenes while they're speaking good of them in front of other people. This is weird. This is another thing, but Americans are not like that. Okay, in general, not like that at all. So the French kind of have a time with Americans, and Americans have a real tight time with the French. Okay, and so do other cultures have a difficult time with French, and the Hungarians are another one, because they're kind of like the French, but a little bit more. So this kind of, this is really, really interesting thing. So there's that factor. That's the French. Okay, I'm not going to try to go into. You got to read my book or my article on working the French to understand working the French if you want to see more about that. Okay, but I'm kind of getting these anecdotes. Now the Germans. I worked in a German company for 14 years. Okay, and I worked on a lot of strategic projects with a lot of Germans of different backgrounds and different experiences. And the Germans, especially now in the kind of the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s now, talking about, transparency. I've heard the word transparency used sometimes. And you know what? It's not transparency. No, it's not transparency, because I tell them, you're not being transparent with me. I've had to say this to a few bosses that are kind of high level, okay? And I've said, you're not explaining your strategy to me, and you're not being transparent with me. So you're not being honest to me, because you say you're being transparent, which is a word you use, but you're not being transparent. The problem is that I am actually transparent, because I say what I think and I do what I say equals what I think. And this kind of is difficult to understand, because that's what I do. And so I call them out. I call people out when they're not being transparent. And I've done this. And I have, honestly, in phone calls at work, multicultural sessions of kind of really important, let's say this kind of really important projects, when a German has taken over my thing, where they called me in to kind of help them. And I did a lot of work, and then they decided to do it a different way at the last minute and do it. I said, you're not being transparent. And for a lot of people, a lot of cultures, and I have hung up on the conf call and then did not participate in the project again. Whoa. Yeah, because I'm being transparent. You called me in, you wanted me to work on it, you wanted me to help you, and then I did it this way, I did it well. I had worked with another colleague in France to actually do this, and you take over and decided to take over the thing because you're being a German bulldozer. I'm not going to get into that right now. I got another article coming, work with the Germans. Watch that one when I get to it, okay? But I'm just saying, the whole thing's come back to how Americans function, not how the Germans function. But I'm again an example of the Germans and telling you there's another article coming out about working with the Germans, okay? Or a video, whatever we're going to call this thing. But there have been cases where I have actually hung up on a conf call with 20 or 30 people on a phone call from all over the world saying, I'm out of the project, goodbye. They did have to actually beg me to come back in, okay, to help just to train the people to kind of get it done. But I said, I will only do that, nothing else, and I will not talk to that person anymore. And actually, I have not talked to that person again for a number of years because that person burned the bridge and did something that you don't do with Americans is you don't do that, okay? Because I'm being transparent, and that person was saying they're being transparent, but not being transparent. And I finally said, over. Business is over. The deal is over, okay? And I gave the example of the other one of the two people that are kind of high and I've been told kind of, I've been told we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but it's not transparent, not being shared. So I am sharing that fake transparency doesn't work with Americans. Fake transparency. It's the so-called transparency title. To just have a transparency label to say being transparent is not going to work with Americans because Americans are actually transparent by nature. By nature. Actually, it's a condition. It's a learned condition. It's a learned behavior. I got to explain this. Okay, this is a book. You're watching a book. It's actually learned with a few references we go. It was actually learned because most Americans, I'm not saying all again, okay, we're just being generic here, that a lot of Americans, they went to kindergarten when they're 5 years old. And what you do in kindergarten before you learn to read, it's about before learning to read, is you bring objects into the class. So what I would do, okay, back then we brought in, an object like a teddy bear or something. Today, we'd bring a mask in, right? We talk about the mask. Show and tell. It's called show and tell. So I'm going to show and tell the mask. I'm going to tell about the mask when you're 5 years old. Or I'd come in with, I'm going to have a few things. Got a battery charger. Okay, so I'm charging my battery charger right here. I can't show the picture. I can't get it in there. Got the battery charger. Or I got a phone. Okay, got a phone. I'm going to come in with a phone. Or I'm going to come in with, I don't know, some kind of coming with a Wi-Fi router or something, or whatever. Okay. Coming with my car keys. Okay, we come in with the things I got to do. Okay, so we're coming in the car keys. This is not a key. This is a badge key for the car, right? So, Eiffel Tower too, kind of thing, right? See, it's Eiffel Tower, little twinkle. Kids in America, in general, learn how to do oral exposés from the age of 5 years old by doing show and tell. And sometimes in big companies, you have these things called show and tell because it comes from that, right? And what you're doing, but the show and tell that you see in big companies are not the real show and tell. They've kind of borrowed the idea. It's like borrowing the concept of Halloween, but not really actually doing real Halloween. Okay? Same thing. You borrow the concept, but you don't really borrow the concept. You borrow an adaptive version, which is actually adulterated and changed the concept from the beginning. Okay? I'm not saying the beginning concepts are always good. I'm just saying that they're changed. And so then you end up with this changed concept. But show and tell makes it that kids actually talk about what they have. And there's on top thing, the whole social culture thing of the Industrial Revolution. All the different cultures need to be able to communicate together in basic English because they don't have languages in common. So that kind of contributes to this whole thing. They all have to talk in basic English, which is reduced English, or to reduced vocabulary. It's the whole thing. If you want to study more about that, go look at controlled language. Hey, I'm talking a little about my past background and my business stuff and what I do. Look at reduced language, look at controlled language, look at plain language. Okay, look at those kind of terms. And that will expand a little bit more about how the whole American culture kind of grew through the colonies to the continent, and how the whole concept of simplified communication is actually how we do it. And that's why Americans are good sellers. They're good salespeople because they know what to get down to the basics. Here, my problem is I'm trying to do this book. I'm trying not to do my pitching, okay? Because I do pitches too. But Americans do who, what, when, where, why, how much. Okay, done. That's you got to do this, and you do this, you're done. Okay, and no going back and Americans not going to do like the Europeans. Okay, several European cultures. We'll start with who I am. My name is Jeff Allen. Here's my background here, and we're going to bore you for like the first 25 minutes of the discussion. Okay, then we're going to talk about we're finally going to get down to the end of the paragraph, 3 paragraphs later, where we say, what's the thing you got to remember? This is like, doesn't work with Americans, okay? The Americans want to see who, what, when, where, why at the very beginning, and then you start telling with the stuff, okay? Because we want to know what we're dealing with here. A lot of Europeans are really suck at this. I'm going to say you suck, okay? Because you're trying to get the whole historical background and stuff, whereas we just want to know, the Americans want to know the essentials. Then we can discuss the necessary kind of cite the references and stuff and get into more. I'm not saying Americans are good, okay? I'm not saying that they're good. I'm not saying they're better. I'm just saying that's the way they think, okay? And the way you got to get through and do a deal with Americans, you got to be able to think this way and present that way, or you won't get the collaboration, or you won't get the funding, you won't get something out of it if you don't present the way that the Americans think, okay? So this is why this is important. I'm not saying they're better. I want you to understand, I'm not saying Americans are better. I'm saying they're different. And you got to understand how they're different. And that you need to adjust to how they're different. And you need to understand how they are transparent and how they think. And if you present anything, with any doubt or suspicion that what you are saying is so-called transparent and it's not, they will call you out and bluff you. They will say, no bluffing. Okay, they will do this to you. And they will call you out because you are lying to them. We have no problem saying you're lying. Somebody says, I have no problem telling people. And I tell them, don't give me BS. And I'm going to get off the phone. You know, you're wasting my time. Okay. So this is really important to understand. Doesn't that sound kind of, now I'm not saying I'm Trump, right? I'm not. I'm just saying this culture kind of brought it that way. And I've tried 32 years to actually, I've been acculturated in France. I'm more French than I am actually American now. I'm a hybrid. I kind of feel really weird. But there are just things I can't give up, right? I'm not able to, it's the fault of culture, okay? We're gonna have to keep back, everything is a lot to the fault of culture, because we are cultural beings. We are brought up we are conditioned in the culture. And even some kids are actually able to, third culture kids, we call them third or fourth culture kids. They grow up in third, fourth cultures. We kind of, the people that are like that are missionary kids, diplomats kids, those kind of folks that kind of move around a lot. Military brats too. So they're those kind of 3 cultures. The kids kind of move around a lot. So they have to acculturate to different things. And they don't know what they belong to. So they have multiple facets of they have different cultural traits because of where they grew up in different places. But if you've lived long enough and lived, the first 20 years in a certain culture, 20, 25 years, up until like university studies, you're kind of ingrained in that. And so it's hard to release that and get rid of it. Even if you come to a country like I did, and I will say I came to France, which is very into, you need to integrate. That's how you prove yourself. And I've done that. But now it's kind of like I don't have to prove that anymore, right? So I can actually be who I am, which is, there is a bit of that American part that I'm not saying is good. I'm just saying it's the way I am, the fault of culture, right? So, and this is everywhere, every culture. We all are as we are. But the transparency thing is really important to understand, because if you do anything to an American who is very outspoken, okay, if you get an extrovert kind of outspoken American, you're dead. I mean, you're just, they're gonna call you out, and they're gonna shout. They're gonna call you out. Americans will shout out people, and they will call out people. Okay, that shout out is me praises and kind of say that I want to call you. I want to shout out and say, "Hey, you did a great job," and they'll call you out in front of other people. Sorry, I'm just hitting the table here. They'll call you out if you bluff them in front of other people. Okay, they will do that. Beware. I've run into lots of problems with that, and I'm being transparent about hey, it's not a failure. I just said you guys screwed it up. I actually run into this all the time at work because I call that stuff transparent. I'm not hiding anything. And I'm not going to let other people hide stuff either. I'm not going to let them hide stuff. If we're saying a tell it like it is culture, we believe in tell it like it is, you better tell it like it is. But don't say you're going to tell it like it is and you don't tell it like it is because you want to hide it. Because that doesn't work with an outspoken American. Okay. Because they've been brought up in what transparency is. Beware. I'm saying beware because you get yourself, because if you are in a culture that is trying to bluff, okay, to use these other terms as kind of, we want to make it feel good and look good, you will be called out, okay? It's a warning by an American who is, now, there are Americans who will do it and there are Americans who won't do it. Now, see, the difference is you get Americans that will go live in a culture and then they will so much integrate the other culture, they'll actually have absorbed into it to where they're fearful of being who they are anymore or what they grew up in because that can get them into trouble, right? I don't care about it because I don't need to, because I don't need to fit to other things because I've got enough of a background that I'm known well enough that what I do is successful. So I don't worry about it. And I don't worry about having to submit to certain things. I'll submit to. Done it. Okay, done it. I played it. Or sometimes I submit partially. Okay, I kind of do it. But if you break the rules of transparency and you say you're doing it and you say you're doing it, you're not doing it, then I call it out. And Trump did it. I mean, others do it too. People do it, and there are a lot of Americans do a lot of videos and stuff online. Why is the American culture so good at YouTube and selling? Because they do this. And I'm not saying they're better. I'm just saying they're good at this. They're good at this because there's also other reasons. So you need to dig deep. You need to think. You need to think about who you are. You need to think about how you do things. Sorry about the bit of background noise here. You need to think about that before you start messing around with an American who's going to be vocal about being transparent. Because if you start telling the American to stop being that, boy, you are going to put oil on the fire. I'm telling you, you're putting oil on the fire. And look what happened to Trump. Someone throws stuff on him, he just comes back and blasts back more. That's the way. But then you've got Americans that will have lived overseas, and there'll be a culture to a certain culture that is oppressing kind of things, and they'll be oppressed, and they will kind of hide behind the scenes because they're trying to protect themselves, because they're trying to adapt to the other culture, and live in the other culture was they might not feel actually comfortable doing it, but they've realized I got to do this. But see, that folks that don't have to live under that oppression, we don't care about it. So we'll speak it out. So this is something, and I'm not saying it's best. I'm not saying it's better. I have made mistakes. I've made mistakes in certain contexts that didn't work in certain contexts because of the way I am, because of the culture I grew up in, because of the fault of culture, right? But the transparency thing is really something you don't want to mess with. If you're coming from another culture and you say that you're transparent, if you say that you are and you're not, this is dangerous for you in front of any Americans who live the transparent thing of who you are, what you think. The think, do, say thing is all the same. You're dead meat. Okay, I'm going to say you're dead meat if you play that card and you try to play it and you in front of people that really do it, and they will call you out. So I'm trying to think of other examples here. I think that's the majority of them. And again, I'm saying Americans are not always right. They're not. In fact, they're wrong on a lot of things too, which I'll get to in the rest of the chapters of the book. Okay, but I'm just explaining to you one of the chapters here about transparency and the real important essentials to keep in mind when you are dealing with Americans and dealing with Americans who truly live by to a real veritable transparency, not a say it transparency, not a kind of a marketing term, a buzzword that you use. If you use the buzzword and you don't do it, I will warn you, if you use the word transparency in whatever culture you're from in front of Americans and you don't display it, it destroys your credibility to those Americans and they won't trust you. They won't trust you. Whereas Americans who do this, actually people can trust them because they know because it's all the same. What you say is what you think is what you do. So you get what you get. The meal, it's like McDonald's, the whole McDonald's things where you come to McDonald's, you see the hamburger, they get this Big Mac that's like 5 layers thick in the picture, and it looks like this, because it's all Play-Doh stuff. They kind of played with the thing and make it look big. When you come there, it's this little dinky thing in the cell box. That's not transparency, right? McDonald's kind of American culture. So that's kind of, I can kind of joke about that. But Americans want it to be as it is. They want it to. They don't want to live They don't want to live a. They don't want to live a schizophrenic thing where you do one thing, you say one thing, and you live another thing and do. And they don't like to live two different things. They don't like to have to live between two different worlds. They don't want to live in two different metaverses at the same time. One, and there are a lot of Europeans. I know a lot of Europeans that do this. They actually have a way they do things at home, and they might have things to do in their personal life, and actually they do things at other, like associations and stuff. They have another way, and have another way in the business. They actually have different lives. Isn't that scary? I mean, it's not scary. For an American, that's like, no way. You're the same person everywhere. Again, I'm being general. There are, and the usually exceptions are the ones who have lived in another culture and been oppressed by that culture for so long that they've actually had to change because they feel like they have to survive in that other culture. Okay, but this is where some of Americans, and I'm talking about Americans that have lived overseas. I'm not talking. There are Americans that have lived always in America too, and this will be even more intense. And so that's why a lot of Americans actually supported Trump, even if they didn't believe in what he believed in. They believed in his transparency and his authenticity and his credibility, because he said what he thought he said what he think what he said. That's just the way it is, and do. So a lot of Americans actually supported him because of that, not because they believe in what he believed in. It's because of the way he is. Because he's not like another politician who says one thing and lives another and says another. Right. Politicians don't. This is why the whole politics thing is important, because politics is a whole thing. Business, a lot of politics, anyways. So transparency is a really important factor. And I'm going to finish up with this section or this chapter of my book, because there are other chapters to work on, and they're going to throw me out of the restaurant because they're going to tell me they're going to turn off the lights on me. So got to kind of finish up here, and I'll start with another chapter maybe tomorrow, over the weekend. Come back and let's have some fun to learn about understanding America and Americans. Thanks so much.